Hello. I expect that, like me, you are fortunate enough to have a warm, comfortable and safe home. And yet the season of Lent is all about being in the wilderness with Jesus. We read of him being baptized, and then St. Mark tells us that he was immediately chucked out into the wilderness. The Greek word is ekballo. It's the throwing of a ball. Jesus was thrown out into the wilderness. And being thousands of miles away in the west, it needs some imagination on our part to think of Jesus in the wilderness. The word itself derives from wild beasts. It was the place where wild beasts lived. And the wilderness was inhospitable and dangerous. And in both the Old and the New Testaments, there are many references to the wilderness. Not exactly desert, but places where scrub and thorn bushes grew and food and water was scarce. To the Jews, the wilderness was deep in their collective memory. It was the place where they were tested after they escaped from slavery in Egypt. It was the place where they were given the 10 Commandments and led and formed by God through Moses to be God's chosen people, who were then led into the land of milk and honey, the promised land. The Old Testament also tells of Elijah, a wild, solitary figure who lived in a hermit's cave on Mount Carmel, and who had a profound meeting with God in the sound of sheer silence. Then in the New Testament, we read of another wild man of the wilderness, John the Baptist, clothed in camel's hair and a leather belt. He was the voice of one crying in the wilderness, "Prepare the way of the Lord." The people of Israel were in the wilderness for 40 years, and Jesus was in the wilderness for 40 days, being tempted and being prepared for his special mission. It was in the wilderness that they believed that the demons lived, and so later, when Emperor Constantine ended the persecution of Christians, the red martyrs gave way to the white martyrs, men and women who went into the desert wilderness to be tempted and to do spiritual battle with the demons. They became known as the desert fathers and mothers, who lived in caves and monasteries which still exist and flourish today. And these desert fathers and mothers laid the foundations for the Christian spiritual tradition of contemplative prayer. So the wilderness is both a place of temptation and also a place of formation. Lent is a time of temptation and formation. I don't know how it's going for you, or what you decided to give up or take up for Lent. And I hope you've decided to do both. And of course, you may have been tempted to lapse already or give up altogether. It has to be said that Christians are not always good at self-discipline. And yet the traditional Lenten practices are fasting, Bible reading, prayer and almsgiving. Some of it we can do together. In our parishes we have various Lent courses, Lent lunches, Stations of the Cross, and there are online courses, Lent books and Lenten opportunities. Lent is a wilderness time of temptation and formation. It is a time to strengthen our self-discipline, to become stronger and better because we have spent time with Jesus these 40 days. We also live in a world that can feel like a wilderness. It's wild, unruly, evil and disordered. We see on television the war in the Ukraine, people being injured and killed, and millions fleeing into exile and into an unknown wilderness for safety, in the hope of finding home and being able to return to the promised land. We still live with the pandemic and have failed to protect the poor and developing nations. People are confused about their identity and suffer mental and emotional distress. We see public figures and politicians behaving disgracefully, and the list goes on and on. So Lent is a wilderness experience that strengthens us to live within a wilderness world. So enjoy the rest of Lent and the promise of Easter. Amen.